Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support. Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera. Thank you for joining me on my little pod. You have a ton to choose from, but you chose mine, so I thank you for that. Just want to remind you to follow me on socials at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content on Instagram, X, or Twitter. I think we're all still calling it Twitter, right? Facebook, TikTok, on the web at bio.site at /Eat Your Content. And now I'm up on YouTube. So just starting in the YouTube space. Uploading some old episodes now, so if you care to see the video hijinks of the audio version of these podcasts, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Some podcasting or some programming reminders on my podcast. I'm doing a series called The Search for Jacksonville's Food Identity, where I interview a bunch of very well-versed foodies and food historians and trying to figure out what it is about Jacksonville and our food identity and why we are kind of trying to find out what that is. So be sure to like, subscribe wherever you get your podcast to make sure you are up to date on all of those episodes. On today's show, I am continuing the series of The Search for Jacksonville's Food Identity. And my guest for today is a travel and lifestyle journalist. She's a Jacksonville writer for Eater Miami. She's also a freelance writer for Conde Nast Traveller, Insider, Forbes, probably a lot of other places I'm forgetting that you probably have seen her work on. Introducing Megan DuBois. Did I get that last name right? I'm sorry, DuBois?
You did. And I love the intro saying, are we still calling it Twitter? Are we calling it X? I am still a Twitter person. When I'm sending an email, I'm like X, but we're also still calling it Twitter. So I think that's really fun. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there are still calling it Twitter too.
I mean, is anybody actually calling it X? I don't know. Everybody I know is still calling it Twitter. It's still Twitter.
Yep.
You can change it any way you want. It's never going to be not Twitter. So.
Nope, exactly.
But journalist, you got to put the X and then in parentheses, formerly known as Twitter, and make sure we get that right. So, well, thank you for being on the pod. I appreciate your time and your knowledge, and we're going to talk about food and talk about travels, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. So, thank you for taking the time to be with me.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, I want to talk about you and your background before we kind of get into it a little bit. You are a travel and lifestyle journalist, freelance writer, dream job for many, I'm sure. How does one kind of get into traveling and writing? Like, what was the bug that bit you to decide, you know what, I just want to do nothing but rack up frequent flyer miles for the rest of my life?
Well, my kind of story to get into this job is a little bit interesting. I graduated from University of North Florida here in Jacksonville. My background is PR and sport management. I did 7 sports internships in college and I couldn't find a job in sports. So I worked in PR for 3 years for a small boutique agency. And on the side, I was doing a little bit of freelance writing about Walt Disney World. It's so close. We're annual pass holders. And it just has kind of blown up from there. And now I travel all over the world talking about theme parks, food, things you can do with your family. And it is so much fun. And I've been doing it full time for 5 years and I don't want to do anything else.
Wow, that's amazing. And I have seen your articles a lot about Disney. You do write a lot about Disney. Have you visited every Disney park in the world?
I've not done the Asia parks or Disneyland Paris. It's on my list, but I've done all 5 Disney Cruise Line ships. I am going to Disney's resort in Hawaii, Aulani, later this month. Actually, I'm very excited about that. And I've stayed at every Disney hotel at Walt Disney World Resort.
Wow.
Yeah.
So of all the Disneys, being that you're actually from Jacksonville, kind of live here, so bias may be there. But what is your favorite Disney park out of all of them? They all have little differences, right? So which one, if you could only go to one park for the rest of your life, which one would it be?
My favorite park is actually over in California. It's Disney California Adventure. It's so small. It's so easy to do. My favorite attraction is there. It's Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. It's just such a fun ride. The storyline is really fun. The music that goes with it is all like 60s, 70s, 80s rock and roll, and you don't know what song you're gonna get when you get onto the attraction. There's like five or six different rotating songs. It is just so great, and then tons of great food, obviously. Honestly, I think Disneyland's food is better than Walt Disney World's food, just because
Uh-oh.
they can change the menus more often. It's more of a locals only kind of park versus Walt Disney World, where it really caters to tourists who are maybe only coming once or twice in their life. So I like trying new things, and Disneyland just gives a better opportunity to try new things every time that I'm there.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they California Adventure has the Avengers campus, right? Is that where that's at?
Yes.
Because I'm a
Yes.
big MCU head, and that is definitely on my bucket list to go do.
It is
The
so
Star
fun.
Wars, yeah, the Star Wars place is pretty cool down in Orlando, but I definitely want to go to the Avengers campus. So I will definitely be hitting you up on some tips and tricks there the time I get to go. So that should be fun. So you travel a ton. I was stalking your Twitter, and in 2023, you said you traveled a total of 138 days. You spent 17 days at some form of Disney park. You went on 8 cruises, 15 countries, and rode about 180 stories. That
Yep.
is a ton of traveling. But you call Jacksonville home, and not just Jacksonville
Yep.
home, but you are actually born and raised in Jacksonville. Is that correct?
Yep.
Wow, that's great. And in Jacksonville too, because we're such a transient city, it's hard to find people that are born and bred and raised in Jacksonville. So, for all the travel work that you're doing and writing, you call Jacksonville home. So I'm really glad to have you on to talk about the search for Jacksonville's food identity. And I do want to talk a little bit about food identity for a few minutes because you've traveled a ton. You've been to a bunch of countries, a bunch of cities. What is it that makes a particular food iconic for that area? What are some of the distinguishing factors, qualifications, maybe that you see something like, the deep dish pizza is Chicago's kind of, thing, or the Chicago hot dog, or Jewish delis in New York, or they're just known for that. What are the qualifications for a particular type of cuisine or a dish to be iconically theirs?
I think it's ingrained in the culture. It's been around for so long that when people think of that destination, there's automatically something that pops up in the food realm that they want to try. And maybe they don't know that it's a thing, but they're searching on Instagram, they're searching on TikTok to find the best place to try that one thing, like a New York style deli or a Chicago deep dish pizza or the best croissant in Paris. Um, I think something that is really telling of a food culture is what you see locals eating, whether it's on a sidewalk cafe or you would hear about it from the hotel concierge and they're like, oh, like this is where I take my family. It's not somewhere that is kind of in the big bulletins that you're seeing in your hotel room of like, these are places you get discounts. Those might be okay, but the best places are where locals are going. And it's those true hidden gems that can tell a lot about the food culture in a destination.
So, being born and raised in Jacksonville, you've seen the Jacksonville food scene through many iterations. What are you noticing about Jacksonville now in the food scene? I've lived in Jacksonville for about 10 years, or almost 10 years. And in the 10 years that I've been here, I've seen the food just boom in some areas. So, what are you noticing with food trends in Jacksonville? What are you excited to see? And what are some things that you kind of hope to see maybe in the future?
Yeah, so I've been in Jacksonville my whole life, and when I was a kid, you really only saw chain restaurants in town. Like, and if you did have a local restaurant, it was maybe one or two in a neighborhood. It wasn't a gathering spot for locals to make a destination meal at across town. And I think now, even over the past couple of years, local restaurants has become like the thing. Nobody really wants to eat at the chain restaurants, even if they're good. Like, let me tell you, I can put down on a bloomin' onion at Outback. But sometimes you just want to go to that local steakhouse, or I just went to Lucky Cat Dumplings over off of Old St. Augustine Road last weekend for a birthday celebration. It's only been open for 6 months. It's owned by the same family who owns Timois. It was phenomenal. I just think the food culture in Jacksonville is shifting, not just with new restaurants, but new cuisines. And it's not just like cheeseburgers and greasy fries anymore. And there's really great barbecue restaurants, and there's great seafood that's getting caught that morning that's being put on your plate for dinner or for lunch. Um, and I think like more ethnic foods, people are willing to try more things than they maybe were before because maybe they've seen it on TikTok and now they want to go and try it because TikTok's the best source for food information. You can see it, you can see someone's instant reaction to what they're trying, and maybe it's on your side of town and it's close and you can stop by on a weekend.
Yeah, yeah. Now, when I came to Jacksonville back in 2014, they just kind of made food trucks legal, right? So, how much has food trucks made an impact on what you were saying about the local cuisine here in Jax? I see new food trucks just popping up all over town every day. So, how much of an impact in your time from pre-food trucks to now has that made an impact in Jacksonville?
I think it's made a huge impact. Food trucks, especially when I was in college, they were really popular. There was always one or two kind of hanging around the neighborhoods of UNF, and all the students would go there for lunch between classes. And it was kind of the spot to hang out. And a lot of the food trucks in Jacksonville have sustained, or they've even made it to where they can be brick and mortar restaurants now. So a great example is Happy Grilled Cheese. They have two locations, and they used to just hang out in a parking lot like over by UNF, and I love them. Their pulled pork and macaroni and cheese grilled cheese is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Abstract is another one. Abstract Filipino is
Hmm.
another great brick and mortar food truck success story, where they started out as a food truck and now they're a great local restaurant now that's doing gangbusters in the city there on Beach Boulevard. So let's talk about Jacksonville specifically. So we talked about the food identity in other places. We talked about, the delis in New York, Chicago, even Disney World has an iconic dish, Dole Whip, right? You can't go to
Yep.
Disney without getting a Dole Whip. So what is it about Jacksonville? We are the largest city by landmass, and there's almost a million people, if not a million people, here in Jacksonville. Why are we, and we have the river and the ocean. You would think we would be known for seafood, but we're not really. So why is it that Jacksonville, a city of our size, I mean, even our neighbors like in Miami, they're known for Cubans, or Tampa, if you're known for Cubans, that's a different podcast for another day. But and you have Key West known for key lime pie and so on and so forth. We are a bigger city than those. Why aren't we known for something iconic? Why, when people say, "What should I?" What is Jacksonville's known for in terms of food? I'm kind of like, oh, I mean, why is that?
I think part of it is people are always coming and going from the city. We're a big military city. So there's always new families coming in and families who've gotten new deployment papers moving out. So there's not any sort of um, consistent movement in people in the city, of people staying put and deciding this is what our city is going to be known for. I also think it's a big medical city. So you have people coming in to have a procedure done at Mayo Hospital or at MD Anderson downtown, and then they're going back home. And even though they might live here for a month or 2 months because they're in recovery from whatever situation they're in, they're just not able to produce the type of culture that a place like Miami would be able to, and say like everybody in Miami is loving Cuban food or they love X, Y, and Z because we've lived here our whole life. I think something that Jacksonville kind of struggles with is, like you said, is the seafood identity. We have the river, we have the ocean, but there's a ton of seafood restaurants in town, but none of them really stick out as like that's the one place everybody talks about, because everybody has their favorite, but they're all over town. Fish camps are all over town. They're great. They're all getting local Mayport shrimp, but there's not the one that's like that's the one you really need to go to in Jacksonville.
Would you say it's kind of like Jacksonville is an interesting city the way it's set up. It's a big city made up of a lot of small neighborhoods, right? And
Yes.
it's almost like each neighborhood is its own community.
Yes.
And so, for instance, in Mayport, I live kind of close to Mayport. So when you say seafood restaurants, I'm like, no, you got to go to Mayport. You got to go to Mayport Seafood. You got to get to Mayport Shrimp there. But you live up in the north side. You might have a fish camp. You live by the beach. You're going to go somewhere else. And do you feel like that kind of disjointedness is kind of part of the quote unquote blame of us not having an iconic Jacksonville food identity?
I think so. And I was actually just talking about this with my mom like 2 days ago because I have an assignment about like the best new foods in town, but sometimes people aren't willing to travel to over the ditch, if you will,
Right, right.
from like I live in Orange Park. So I rarely want to travel to the beach. It's 45 minutes away, but I know there's great restaurants at the beach, but there's also great restaurants on my side of the river. Um, the disjointedness kind of reminds me of New York City, even though it's one large city, each neighborhood has its own very distinct feel. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're going to one area because your friends live there, but you might not go there otherwise. And that kind of feels like Jacksonville. It's like when I think of somewhere like an Avondale, I immediately think of the Fox, which is one of my favorite
Right.
breakfast spots in town. It's
Yep.
so good. Their corned beef hash hits every single time. But like, am I going to go travel across the beach to go and have breakfast? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, kind of thinking about that, it's what could be, I guess, what could be a thing that could bring the communities together to say, of all the places in Jacksonville, this is the one place you've got to go no matter where you live. What would it take for a restaurant maybe to try to do that, do you think?
I think social media has had a really big impact on that. Um, I follow a couple of people. I'm going to pull them up so I can shout them out. They are Trey and Glenda from Tag Along with Us. They are awesome shouting out local restaurants, and they've made me want to go farther out than I normally would to try somewhere new. I think social media has a really big impact on people kind of bringing that community together because they saw it on TikTok or they saw it on Instagram. They're telling their friends are telling more people and deciding that's the one spot for X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. So if you were in charge of, well, actually, let me say it this way: as a Jacksonvillian, what would you say if you had to put your finger on it? What are one or two things that you feel that Jacksonville is known for, or maybe should be known for, that maybe Visit Jacks or the Chamber of Commerce could really, pump up and make a destination spot that you can't go anywhere else except Jacksonville to get this thing? What would that thing be?
Honestly, barbecue. We have a ton of
That's
great
interesting.
barbecue restaurants in town. And I mean, you can complain all day that you can do South Carolina barbecue, you can do Alabama style barbecue, you can do Kansas City barbecue, Memphis style barbecue. Jacksonville is such a great melting pot of all of those things. And a lot of our barbecue shop owners come from these big barbecue destinations. So they're bringing that knowledge with them and then infusing some of the local culture with it. So I just ate at a local spot that's doing great brisket, but they're also doing daddle pepper barbecue sauce, and daddle peppers are local to St. Augustine. So they're really trying to make Jacksonville barbecue something really special for our area.
So, what would you define Jacksonville barbecue being, other than the daddle pepper that we were just talking about? What would distinguish it from? Because I found it interesting. You said barbecue. I for sure would thought you went seafood or something like that. But what is it about Jacksonville barbecue for you that would distinguish it from like Alabama or North Carolina or Kansas City or those meccas of barbecue? What would make Jacksonville's barbecue different for you?
So I think some of the best barbecue in town is obviously like slow and low smoked. It's got that great smoke ring around whatever meat you're trying. But then it's also got a really heavy bark of spices and seasonings that the owners have put on and the pit masters have made their amazing recipes for. And then your sauce is always served on the side. I find that most of the best barbecue restaurants aren't slathering their meats in sauce because most of the time they don't need it. There's so much juice still retained in the ribs or the brisket or the chicken or whatever you've ordered that the sauce is just kind of like a little add-on to give your palate a break of just having that complete overwhelming smoke flavor. And I think that's what makes Jacksonville barbecue so special.
Okay, okay. So, what's your favorite barbecue spot here in town?
Oh gosh, there's so many. ABBQ out at Jack's Beach is great for brisket, and their sides are phenomenal. I'm kind of partial to Mojo's because I like their Texas style hot links, and that's really the only thing I get there. And I love their hand cut French fries; it's delicious. Their onion rings are also delightful. They're like the size of dinner plates. They're served with a horseradish dipping sauce. That's kind of like my go-to like little treat. Is like I get French fries, which is way too many fried things. French fries, a thing of onion rings, and then hot links for a dinner, like to treat myself, is delightful. I just went to a place out in Lake Asbury over on the Orange Park side of town called Four Trees, I believe is what it's called. I'll have to look that and I'll send you all the details for that one. They do $6 pulled pork sandwiches once a week. Great deal. I ended up making two separate sandwiches out of how much pork was on that sandwich. And it was so juicy and so moist, and it didn't need any sauce. The bark was like a little bit crispy, but like you could still get through it. It had the perfect textural difference.
Nice,
There's
nice.
just a ton of great barbecue places in town, and it's finding the one that you like is and and making sure that it's one you're willing to go back to. We all really need to support local restaurants, obviously, and meat is so expensive. So take your leftovers home with you because barbecue is great reheated.
So if anybody from the Chamber of Commerce, Visit Jack's is listening, pump up that barbecue, get get those barbecue restaurants highlighted on our website. Tell people this is a destination place for barbecue when you're coming to visit the miles long beaches and everything like that. So um, one article I was reading that was talking about kind of Jacksonville's history. Camel riders were mentioned a lot on that, which I thought was interesting because I would not have associated Jacksonville with camel riders. What's your experience with that? Where can people find a good one? And how do you feel about riders calling that kind of an iconic Jacksonville food?
So my dad is a truck driver, and he gets a camel rider like once a week from a local spot and up by his work. And he's like, I had a camel rider for lunch today, Megan. It was really good. I've never had one. So like
Really?
I know they're like a big like historic part of the city because we have a really large immigrant population, and that's kind of how it got started. But I've never had one, and it's on my list of things to try.
Also, too, one thing you mentioned about the kind of the immigrant population. I'm Filipino, and I didn't know until moving here that Jacksonville had the largest Filipino population in all of Florida. And when you have large immigrant populations in a city, you tend to find places like Chinatown. You tend to find places like Little Havana down. But here, there's not like a Little Manila or anything like that. Do you think Jacksonville is missing out by not having kind of those? Um, Chinatown, Little Havana, Little Manila type of places that people could go to and say, "Oh, I want some really good Filipino food. I need to go here," or things like that. Do you think we're missing out?
I do, and I think that's part of like Jacksonville's kind of culinary rebirth is hopefully those types of neighborhoods are coming. I think it's just challenging to pinpoint an area of town where those types of places could be and to thrive, and people would want to drive to knowing that's the best place in town to get X, Y, and Z type of food.
Yeah, I do love that there's a lot of Filipino restaurants here in town, right? I do a little bit of cooking, but not that much. And to know that the food of my youth is right here in town is amazing. And we do have a lot of diverse and ethnic dining here in the city that no matter where you're from, you can find food where home is for you. And I think that's really excellent. So, Megan, I thank you so much for all of your time and your knowledge here. So, Jacksonville, we're still on the search for its food identity. For Megan DuBois, it's barbecue. For some others, it's something else. And I think that's overall what makes Jacksonville just great in general. Maybe our food identity is that we don't have an identity, is that you come here and that you can get whatever you want at a very high quality. Uh, Megan, any final thoughts on what you feel like Jacksonville's food identity could be, should be?
I think it's growing. I think it's getting better and better every day. And I'm hoping that listeners go out and try that new restaurant that's been on their list for a while, because not only do our restaurants need guests who are hungry and happy to try something new, they need us so they can stay open. So all of us who know that that's the best spot to get whatever can keep going back to get their favorite dishes.
Yeah, and promote those local places that you go to on social media. They need all the help they can get, and don't have maybe the marketing budget of a chain place. So definitely want to tag those places when you go out to eat. Megan, I just want to give you a few moments here before we wrap up. Where can people find you online? Where can people find you on social? What kind of projects are you working on that you want people to know about?
Yeah, so I am kind of all over the place as a freelance writer. Most of my Jacksonville content can be found on Eater and at Weekend. It's a new Hearst publication where I'm writing about great things to do to fill your time on the weekend. I am on plenty of social media apps. You can find me on Instagram at Mingling with Megan, same for TikTok, and then on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, I am Megan D513.
Awesome. Oh, I did want to mention I do very much appreciate your heat maps on Eater when we're talking about where to eat in Jacksonville and stuff. So I definitely appreciate those. If you are looking for places to eat and you're not sure where to go, definitely hit up the Eater Miami website and search for Jacksonville in their search bar, and you're going to find a bunch of heat maps that Megan here is responsible for putting together. So thank you for your service. We definitely appreciate that.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet.
Well, folks, follow me on socials at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content on most social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also now on YouTube. So this will be going up on YouTube at some point in the future. Megan, thank you again for your time. I appreciate it, and thank you so much for all that you do for the local Jacksonville food community. And good luck on your travels.
Thank you so much.